You have questions? We have answers. Welcome to the Therapist Question Box with your host, Miss Lindsay Schiss.
Welcome back to another episode of the Therapist Question Box, where we are here to tackle your toughest questions. So ask away. Today, I have with me Sway Chavez. Did I say that right?
Chavez.
Yeah,
it's okay. All good.
And we are going to be discussing relationships. So specifically, difficult conversations in relationships. So Sway, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I'm an intern at Therapy Utah.
Yeah. An intern with a lot of experience. But
a lot of life experience. Right. There's been a lot of experience in this realm. I've done a ton of my own healing and a whole journey there that we could go way into, but I won't. Father of 3, and just I love my job. You know, I come out of the therapy office and somebody caught me walking down or clicking my heels after a couple session, and they're like, "That good, huh?" And I'm like, "Yeah, it's awesome."
Legitimately, you were clicking your
literally
heels.
I love it. I can't remember if it was Micah or somebody in the office was like, "That good, huh?" I'm like, "Yep."
Yes, it was. That's awesome. I will agree with that. You love the work you do. Yeah. And when I have staffed some cases with you and we've talked about things, and you get so excited to go in and get ready for, your next session. And so I will attest to that same thing. So It's awesome to have you here. Well, today we want to talk about difficult conversations. So I'll just go ahead and start with a question from our listener, and we'll just dive right in.
Awesome.
So the question is, how do I approach difficult topics like finances or intimacy with my partner without causing tension? What are effective ways to resolve misunderstandings and conflicts? Can you solve that problem in 30 minutes, Sway?
Oh, I don't know if we can, but we can sure give it a shot.
Yes. It's interesting because I think the idea of difficult topics doesn't seem like it should be that problematic. However, it really is.
Yeah.
Why is it so? Why do we shy away from difficult topics?
Well, because they're emotional. And as human beings, emotions don't feel safe.
Which is a problem.
It is a problem.
Yeah.
So I think at the crux of this question, right, we can go down, like we can dive into finances or intimacy or all of that. I feel like as I really thought about this, at the crux of this is, how do we do conflict well?
Isn't that the truth? I think that's the question, because we are going to run into conflict, and
right.
How do we do it well? And I think maybe the first thought of that is we actually have to engage in the difficult conversation.
Right.
Like avoiding it is not going to work.
No.
And how many times do we hear of couples that just kick the can down the road and don't actually address the problem that's in front of them?
Right. We tend to avoid the issue, right? There are several ways couples show up, right? You can avoid it. Some people get explosive or volatile, and so it just depends. Everybody has a different way of showing up in the conflict. And we're afraid, and there's not enough safety in that moment to have a difficult conversation or what we deem as difficult. Often I think the question is how do we avoid the tension? And I think that in and of itself is one of the problems, is we're avoiding tension, right? Because we're afraid of the anger.
So are you suggesting that we shouldn't be avoiding the tension?
100%.
Okay, tell me why. Because again, even when I said, why do we avoid it? Of course we avoid it because we don't want to have tension.
Right.
It's like, please, we have peace, we have a million other things going on. Can we not have contention in the relationship? So why are you telling me that tension's a good thing?
So tension is a good thing, and that it's actually, or, whatever it might manifest its way. Most of the time, tension manifests itself as anger, right? And we've been told for so many years, our entire lives, don't get angry. How many times did your parents tell you, don't be angry, don't be upset, don't put that down, shut it down.
Yep.
Right? So first of all, we have to recognize that. And then the anger is actually a great indicator of where we're at, and can be an emotion to help us approach our partner then we have to decide, though, in that moment, are we going to approach with shame, blame, criticism, and all of these things, right? Today, I want to reference a lot of Dr. Gottman's book, Fight Right. Incredible book. If you haven't read it, read it tomorrow.
Fight Right.
Fight Right.
Okay.
And it is just, anyway, I'm going to discuss a lot of the things that he talks about in that book today, because it is, anyway, so incredible. So again, anger isn't a bad thing. Anger is just, or tension isn't a bad thing. It is feedback from our minds and really our bodies, right? Because when you get angry, where do you feel it?
Feel in your body.
You don't feel, I mean, sometimes, but you do feel it up here, but that's because your whole head is hot or tight, or, you know what I mean? There's something,
Yes.
right? Or it's like up in your neck and it's prickly and all of that stuff. We feel it in our bodies.
Yeah.
And the problem is that we don't know how to regulate that emotion.
Okay, so if I'm coming, you're saying anger is not a bad thing,
Right.
Which I agree with you. I will often have people write letters when they're processing, and I'll first have them write a letter of sadness, and then I'll have them write a letter of anger. And it's interesting. They often say, "I really don't have anger around this," and I'll say, "Just get curious. Just see if it's there." And let me tell you, I've never had an experience where the anger has not been there. So the anger is often there. But what do we do about it? Because if I come into a conversation hot and I'm angry, boy, it's usually not going to go well.
Right.
So you're saying it's okay, but I've always also been told, especially as a woman, that anger's not awesome. We don't do anger. We can do sadness, fine, but
Yeah.
anger's not okay.
Right.
So how do I come in recognizing I'm angry, but trying to manage, or is it control the anger? What is it? Tell me your thoughts on that.
Yeah. So again, the anger isn't a bad thing, right? It's a feedback saying, hey, something's wrong within me and I need to be heard or understood. And that's really what the anger is saying. The anger is saying, I just don't feel understood in this moment. So if I can approach my partner and say, hey, I don't feel understood in this thing, or heard or seen in this thing, instead of like, I can't believe you, blah, 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 right? Whatever the thing is about, right? That allows us to approach it in a much healthier way, and in a way that's actually constructive instead of destructive.
I like that. It's constructive instead of destructive.
Right.
That's a really important point. But what I heard too is you owning exactly your experience instead of pointing the finger and placing blame.
Right.
Like this is how I feel. This is how I'm experiencing this, right? That's
Right.
owning it versus you did this, you're the problem here.
Right.
Right?
Putting the blame and putting the shame on somebody else for the issue.
Yeah.
Right. Just taking ownership. Hey, when you do this thing, this is how this makes me feel. Can we work collaboratively to come up with a solution to this? Can you at least hold my pain for me? Because that's really what I'm asking for.
Oh man, that is difficult to do.
Yeah.
You said something earlier that I want to come back to, and it made me think of it when you said, can you hold my pain? In order to be able to ask to hold your pain,
Yeah.
gosh, I got to trust that you're going to hold my pain,
Right.
that you're not going to annihilate me, or, like I'm a filleted fish here, and that you're just going to pick it apart. Like,
Yeah.
how do we have safety enough to say, I'm in pain, can you hold my pain?
That's a really great question. And it comes back to, there's a word that we use a lot in therapy speak, and it's called regulation. The number one thing that I work on with couples, I like to meet a couple first for the first time, see what's going on, and then I split them up for probably a month, maybe even 2, and really help them learn how to regulate their emotions and their nervous system, right? So I don't know if you've had an episode around the nervous system or not, but
We haven't yet, but we need to.
okay, yeah. So really quick, right? Your nervous system, I mean, you hear these buzzwords, fight or flight, all these different things. What does that actually mean? And what does it mean to regulate? You also hear the word grounding. I just told you earlier, I don't love the word grounding. To me, what happens when we ground is that we're telling our bodies that it is not okay to have that emotion, to ground it out. And you will see that even in a therapy office, a therapist will get dysregulated themselves and then ground out their client's emotions. And so what'll happen is there's a major difference between grounding and regulating. Regulating is allowing an emotion to have the space that it needs within your mind and in your body. Recognize why this emotion is there and let it have its space. I always go back to Inside Out.
So good.
Okay, so
Yes.
I know it's so childish and so small.
No, it's fantastic.
It's phenomenal.
Yeah.
So if the listeners have not seen Inside Out, I literally give it as homework in the office. I'm like, go home, watch Inside Out 1 and 2, and let's come back and talk next week.
Yeah.
Because it really shows how each emotion is actually just a piece of feedback that we need to understand. And then once we understand where it's coming from, we can be like, oh, that emotion's actually trying to do something good.
Yes.
Right. That whole movie, Joy spends the entire movie trying to ground out sadness.
All the other emotions.
And everybody
right?
else, and
Yes.
everybody else for that
and
matter.
You remember when anxiety at the end of Inside Out 2 said, I was just trying to help. And
Yes.
everyone's so upset, and she just has this moment of like, I was just trying to help. Like
Right.
there was no ill intention. So if we're feeling those, if we can get curious about them, what's going on? What is this emotion trying to tell me? Then I can maybe find some more safety. So what you're
Right.
saying is we have to have safety within ourselves first.
Yes,
Okay.
first and foremost.
So as you're talking about that, I think regulating ourselves is so important. So going into a conversation all frustrated and that it probably is not going to end well. So timing, I would imagine, is really important.
Yes.
Okay. So we've got to be really curious about our timing and make sure that it's a good time for both ourselves and the partner, right? That we're having this conversation with. What else do you feel like are nuggets that help us have productive conversations around tough topics?
Yeah. So the word we were just using, curiosity.
Yeah.
That is key. As we get regulated, as we, kind of calm our nervous system down.
By the way, can you give us a few just quick suggestions how to do that?
Yeah. So one of the things that I like to do is when I start to feel something, I like to make it really big in my body. If that means I have to close my eyes and imagine that emotion overtaking my entire body, giving it a color and, like just exuding that color throughout my entire body and just getting really big in that emotion, it gives the emotion the space to fill up every part of yourself.
Oh my goodness, you're saying the exact opposite. That's why you don't like grounding, because you're going, actually, I give it all the space.
Yes.
Take up whatever you need.
Right.
I love that.
You have to give it its space, and then you say to it, what do you need? What do you actually need right now? Well, I just need to be heard. I'm feeling like not enough. I'm feeling...
So for our listeners, you're saying you're talking to yourself.
Oh, for sure.
Saying, okay, what does this emotion need?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I go back to this idea of you remember the kid that used to flip himself upside down on the school bus and then like walk on the seats?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes,
So
that was my brother.
Right,
Yeah.
So that's for us of a slightly older generation, right? But that kid wasn't necessarily a bad kid. He was just trying to regulate everybody on the school bus to get everybody, you know what I mean? He was just trying to, he's actually a funny kid and he's a really nice guy too.
Yeah.
And he used his humor and his antics to take care of everybody else. Usually it's an emotion that's like, so like that is just trying to take care of that other person. I use that a lot with my clients who are suffering from compulsive sexual behaviors, right? The behavior that you're acting out of is not, it's just there to tell you, hey, something's not right in here.
Yeah.
Something's wrong. So again, going back to that's what regulation can look like, right? And giving it the time and space that it needs, allowing that to happen, and then it moves through us.
Okay.
We could go into a whole thing around trauma and how trauma gets stuck in our bodies, and that's really what's happening, right?
Yeah.
So, so that's a big thing, right? Is giving it the time and space it needs to do its emotional work within us.
Okay.
And that's not grounding it out. That's not telling it to go away.
But when you say this, are you doing this before the conversation, before
Absolutely.
this tough conversation?
Absolutely.
I would agree with that you're making sure you're in a place where you're regulated
Right.
before you're coming into that conversation.
And not to jump too far ahead, but the really cool thing is when you and your partner can do this well together, you actually can co-regulate together.
And co-regulation is actually like the gold standard.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Because we can regulate ourselves, but if you're regulating with a partner, there is something synergistically and energetically
Yes.
regulating about that.
Well, because, and again, we're kind of going off of a tangent here, but like what happens is that's why vulnerability is so powerful, because the more vulnerable you can feel, and when you, effectively give the beach ball to the spouse or the partner and say like, hey, I'm not feeling safe. Can you hold this for me? And they can hold. And all of a sudden now you're co-building both vulnerability and safety in the relationship, that it is synergistic, but it's so reciprocal and it just builds on itself.
Yes.
The more vulnerable you can feel, the more that your partner's choosing you and you feel chosen. The more that you feel chosen, the more vulnerable you can be. The more vulnerable you are, and it just becomes this beautiful cycle.
And
in
yet
relationship.
somebody has to start that cycle.
Correct.
Somebody has to say, I'm willing to be vulnerable enough to say, I need you to support me right now. This feels really hard. I feel really scared. I mean, that is taking a step into the unknown, because you don't know how that's going to be received. You don't know what's going on with your partner, right?
Right.
But taking that, as I think about that, that is such a courageous step to take and to say, I just need some extra support here. And I'm going to trust that you're going to give it to me.
Yeah.
It's a big deal.
And it's really easy for you and I to sit in this room and talk about this stuff. And in real life, this is not how it goes.
Totally.
So one of the other nuggets, if you will, right, is this idea of the 5-to-1 ratio, right? Gottman's talk about this a lot. That there needs to be 5 positive interactions for every negative interaction during conflict.
Wow.
During the conflict.
You're not saying
Because
in general.
No. And if it steps outside of the conflict, the ratio becomes 20-to-1 positive.
Okay, can we just talk about that?
Yeah.
5-to-1 in a conflict.
Yes.
That doesn't sound like a conflict to me. That
No,
actually
right.
sounds like a really nice conversation.
Yeah, right?
Like, what are we talking about? How do we do that? When, again, this is a heated discussion. I mean, if we're talking about finances, we're talking about intimacy, things that have a lot of emotion behind them. How do we have all of this positive to say with one negative in there? I mean, is that even really getting to the heart of the issue?
That's a great question. And I think what it comes down to is we take the heat out of the heated argument. Right? Because if we can remove the heat, if we can lower that temperature for both of us, again, getting regulated, both of us, hey, we could do, Gottman talks about the soft startup. And there's lots of ways to do that. But one of the ways is you can say, hey, I would like to have a discussion about something that's been bothering me. Is there a time and place where you and I can come together and have this conversation? And also checking yourself when you go to have that conversation, when you do this startup, am I regulated enough to even just ask for this?
Yes. Am I regulated enough? I think that's so important, because when I have clients in my office and I will say, when you had that discussion, when this happened, were you regulated? And often they will say, I don't know.
Right.
So we have to get really in touch with ourselves to recognize if we're in a regulated state.
Right.
And I always tell people the first way you're going to know that is your body's going to tell you. Your
Yes.
body is your first indicator. Is your chest feeling tight? Are your shoulders really, compressed? Do you have knots in your stomach? Are you sweating? Is your heart rate changed? That will be an indicator to know, wait, I am getting out of regulation. I need to take a moment. And as we talked about earlier, it's okay to step away from the conversation and get back to a state of regulation. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And one thing that came up for me as you were saying that was there are also some of us that instead of being way up here with the emotion, we're way too down here. And we just avoid and we shut down and we don't have enough temperature actually to have this conversation.
So meaning that's your response. That's, again, the dysregulation is you go into what we call hypoarousal or a depressive state, almost like I'm hibernating here. I like to think of it that way as like, no thanks, too much, I'm shutting down.
Yeah. Well, and I think of playing possum, right?
Totally.
I will often use the possum, when we talk about regulation, because when a possum plays dead, the reason that they don't have a traumatic experience when they're almost killed is because their body shuts down. But what's really cool is to watch them regulate, because what'll happen is it will usually start right up here in the olfactory sense, and they'll just their nose will move a little bit and they'll start to smell. And then sometimes you'll see a little flick of the ear and they're perking up their ears to see if the danger is still around. Right. And then an eye or two will open and they'll just start looking.
Using all their senses.
Yeah. So that's another trick that you can use in regulating yourself, is you can just close your eyes, 5 things you can hear, 5 things you can smell, 5 things you can see, right? And just kind of going down that list of things, right?
Yes.
And so, I use that a lot, because it's once you start to see that and you can see that there's safety, all of a sudden there's movement and there they go. They run off.
Interesting.
Right?
Yeah.
And not the conflict, but the traumatic moment is over.
Right.
And it doesn't get stuck in the body.
Good.
So
I love that. So regulation, safety, the 5-to-1 ratio. What else would you say would be a useful nugget to help this listener engage and actually also not just engage in the conversation, but also have the motivation to do it? Because this is a lot of work. I mean, let's not lie. This is a lot of work.
It is.
It's a lot of internal work to address this, right? It's easier just to get on your phone or watch the TV and kick the can down the road. But how do we, I'm hoping if we have more tools, that we will not be as afraid to engage in these difficult conversations.
Right.
So is there anything else that comes to mind as you're thinking about this that might be beneficial?
Yeah. One that keeps coming to mind is this idea of messiness and grace. So, and it's really hard to do, because from the time we were children, put that away, that needs to get put up in the closet, hurry and clean that up, somebody's coming over. Messiness is not allowed. And the truth is that you and your partner have to come to an agreement that messiness is okay and we're going to get it wrong. If you can both come to an agreement on that and to give each other the space and grace for it to be messy, and know that you're not going to jump into a conversation tomorrow with a 5-to-1 ratio, and it's probably going to look like 1-to-1 or 5 or 1-to-5.
The opposite. Yeah.
Giving yourself the space and grace for that is absolutely pivotal, because this is a learning process. You're both learning. It's not there's a reason. And I use a lot of what we term it experiential type therapies in my office, and the reason that I do that is because it's messy.
Explain what experiential is.
Yeah, so experiential is taking something, an issue, and embodying it some way, somehow.
Experiencing it.
Yes. Right?
Yeah.
So whether that's you grab scarves to represent different emotions, or you have tape and you draw this thing on the wall, right? You illustrate a moment in your life that is this issue, and you can sit there and take a step back from it and look at it and re-experience it from a different angle and a different space. So the reason that I like to use these tools is because it's a messy process. And the entire process of therapy is messy, right? We can sit here,
Amen.
right?
Yes.
We can sit here and talk about all of these things all day long, but unless we go out and experience it, if we don't know how to experience it in our bodies, how on earth am I supposed to experience safety if I don't even know what safety feels like in my body?
Yeah. And you know what, as you're saying that, I think this is really new for a lot of people.
Yes.
A lot of people did not see it modeled well in their family home growing up, right? They didn't see people arguing well and actually coming together and repairing after and having these and regulating. Like, this is like learning to walk. This is brand new for people. So when you say be okay with the mess, because it is going to be messy. And I think when we can say, like, there's safety, if we know that our partner is there and we're there, and at the end of the day, like, no matter what, we're gonna work through this. There's safety in that. Now, that doesn't, we don't always have that kind of of understanding, and so there's fear around that. But I do think we are committed to ourselves to say, no, I actually am here. I want to show up at my highest and best self. And you know what? I'm gonna get it wrong. 100%. I'll get it wrong, but I'm going to keep trying. I'm going to keep trying to get better. Right. So, Sway, with the little time that we have left, is there anything that we haven't touched on that you feel like is really important that you would like our listeners to hear?
There was something in that what you just said, and it completely flew my mind. So give me just a second. I'm trying to remember. I think it was really just around that notion that if we are committed ourselves to doing the best that we can and giving ourselves that space and grace to get it wrong, when we do that, we can show up well. And when we get that wrong, we can do the repair, and we're willing to do the repair, right? Regardless of how our partner decides to show up, I am not proposing that somebody stay in an abusive relationship, right? But regardless of how our partner shows up, if we continue to show up well, we can sit within our own selves and say, I'm doing the best that I can. Also, there was...
Can I say something about that quickly? Yeah. I think we can use that as an excuse all day long to say, you know what, I can't be my highest and best self or show up well because look at what they're doing. They just keep doing X, Y, Z. And so, you know what, I'm not going to do it. Look at them. And we can use that excuse till we're blue in the face. But if you decide, like you just talked about, to show up regardless of how your partner is showing up as your highest and best self, and you're committed to that, boy, that's a huge step in the right direction. And it leaves with there's no excuses. Like, I'm committed to doing this and trying to do it the right way. And I'm not going to blame anybody else or point the finger, because I actually am accountable to myself to be the best person I can be in this situation. So it's not about my partner. I couldn't agree more. And this did strike something for me. And that was there was another recent podcast from the Mel Robbins podcast. She's fantastic. She is fantastic. She just had, and I won't get his name right, so I'm not even going to try. She had a Harvard psychologist on recently, and he talks about this very subject, right? He talks about conflict and what do we do in that. And one of the things that came up for me is when we have a partner that isn't showing up in the way that we need them to, and those types of things, the thing that he says is, people do well if they can. And that was so profound to me, that like, they may not have the tools, they may not have the resources, they may not have the things that they need, right? And just giving your partner that benefit of the doubt that they don't have what they need to get there is a very pivotal point, or a key to coming at it with curiosity. Gosh, that feels so compassionate, that people do well if they can. Yeah. Right? And that we're assuming the best in our partner, that they're doing the best they can with the tools and resources they have available to them. Right. Yeah. Gosh, I want people to think that of me. Yeah. Right? Totally. Like, don't we want that same grace given to us? Like, we're trying our best, and it can look really messy sometimes. Totally. Yeah. I love that. Well, to recap, I want to just go through a few of the things you talked about. Understanding that regulation matters, that when we are not regulated, coming into a conversation like this is not going to work well, but that we've got to get clear on how to regulate ourselves. Yeah. Timing matters, right? Yes. Are we choosing a time when it's the football game, or when it's time to get the kids to a practice, is that when we're choosing to have this conversation? Probably not, right? So recognizing that. I love the 5-to-1 ratio, 5 positives to 1 negative. That feels like a Herculean effort. However, I can see why that ratio matters even in conflict. Understanding safety and recognizing our need to be vulnerable and ask for safety, right? Some vulnerability. And I loved how you talked about that cycle. But it requires that courage. One person to take that step into vulnerability, it requires that. And the messiness and grace, like it's going to be messy, and provide ourselves and our partners with grace. You know, it's really, if we think about it, the reason we're having conflict, if we didn't care, we wouldn't have conflict.
Right.
We have conflict because we deeply care about the relationship and one another. And so the idea is to not look at conflict as a bad thing, but as a way to move forward, to move through the issue, and to move forward in the relationship. Sway, I really appreciate you being here with us and appreciate all of the insights that you've shared.
That was my pleasure. Thanks for having me. This was a riot. I love this stuff. So
awesome.
I'll be here anytime.
We'll have you back.
Okay.
All right. Until next time, take care of yourselves.